In this video, I'm going to walk you through a super simple productivity workflow or system that's sure to help you get more done. So with the different types of work that I've undertaken throughout the years and even ever since I started this YouTube video, I've gone through a lot of different productivity systems. And since you're watching this video, I figure there's probably a pretty good chance you have too. However, even again, just throughout the process of creating and managing videos for this YouTube channel, I have found myself cycling from one to another, researching another, learning it, and just finding that all of them, to some degree or another, some are better than others, but all of them always seem to be overly complex and always ended up adding on more for me to do rather than making what I already had to do easier and faster. Now, when I refer to systems, what I'm talking about are to-do apps, but also systems that revolve around those to-do apps, right? So there's planners I've tried, there's, like I said, apps I've tried, I've created my own note cards. And around those, there's kind of processes or systems that you go through either once or several times throughout a day to help you keep big projects, goals, and tasks moving forward. Some of the problems I encountered to some degree with all of them is that one, most of them were too complicated. And so what that means is that you're spending brain power and time and energy trying to remember or go through your notes or figure out what the next step is just for you to go through and schedule out the next task or project or item you need to address. Beyond that, many of them just aren't practical, so they aren't flexible or they don't account for all of the different variations or difficulties or interruptions that are just normal to everyday life. And so because of the complexity and because of the lack of flexibility, it always ends up that it's just another thing that you have to deal with and another thing that you have to manage. So what you end up with is a productivity tool or system that ends up costing you more time rather than saving it, which to me seems like a contradiction in terms. Okay, so with that being said, what I wanted to do in this video wasn't to just gripe about what I don't like about other productivity tools or systems, but instead what I wanted to share with you is my top 5 most important aspects or pieces of a productivity system that's actually going to help you get more done and that doesn't stress you out or waste a bunch of time in order to learn. Now, as I'm going through these 5 fundamental principles, one of the things I wanted to mention is that everybody's different, and for everybody, productivity looks a little bit different. So these things that I'm sharing with you aren't meant to be like hard, fast rules or I'm some sort of expert with a degree in productivity, but just things that I have personally come to have found as the most important when it comes to me staying focused and getting more tasks and projects done in a day. So you might rearrange or reprioritize some of these, or you might cut them off the list altogether, but it gives you a good foundation or starting point in terms of creating or mapping out a productivity system that works best for you. And lastly, what I'll be doing is after I list them out, I will actually show them to you in practice in the productivity app that I created so you can kind of see a visualization of why these things are so important for staying productive. Okay, so the first is that it needs to be simple. Now that might seem kind of obvious given the gripes that I've had with some of the other productivity tools and systems that I've used in the past, but you would be surprised how important this is and how surprising it is to me that so few of them find this to be an important trait. The reason why simplicity is so important when it comes to crafting your own productivity workflow or system is that if it is not simple, it's going to cause 2 problems for you. First, it's going to make it more difficult for you to actually use the thing. If it's a whole bunch of tags and checklists and sub-checklists and due dates and deadlines and assignees and all these groups and overcomplication of the app itself just makes it harder to use, adds to the stress, and wastes more time. Of course, it can't be oversimplified because at that point you just have a piece of paper and a pencil writing down what you need to do, but there's a balance. And I think that way too many productivity tools and systems err on the side of needless complexity over simplicity and focus on what you need to do next. Number 2 is focus. It needs to help you focus on what is important. If you're looking at many productivity or to-do apps out there, they'll have something that's like the equivalent of a today view, right? So everything that you wanted to review that day, or that's actually due that day, or that you just kind of add to today. The problem is that most of the time when you're looking at some sort of to-do list or productivity app or system, you're going to see a grouping or listing of all of the things that you have to do. And so some of them might allow you to categorize or group those into what you need to be focusing on that day. But more often than not, what you're going to be confronted with is a giant list of tasks, most of which have no relevancy to what you're working on right now. So beyond that, what you're also going to see is even if it does allow you to categorize or group or filter by what you need to be focusing on today, most, if not none of them that I've seen, just allow you to focus on what you need to be looking at right now. We can only work on effectively one task at a time. So it's never really made any sense to me that most productivity tools, best case scenario, are going to show you, here's maybe the top 3 things you need to focus on today, which that's great, but what do I need to be focusing on right now? Focus is imperative when it comes to getting more done, and very few systems give this any credence. The next is the ability to capture. Now, what I will say is many productivity apps and systems do have this fairly inherent in, like I said, most of them. And that is simply the ability to get something out of your brain and into a list that you can review later, right? So a lot of times this is just going to be an inbox or a today view or a specific note card that you carry around with you, or maybe even another to-do app. But you just need to have some sort of way or ability inherent in your system to get something out of your mind and down on paper or into the software or into the system so that you can sort it later. The next is the ability to efficiently prioritize. So let me say that again. Prioritize, but efficiently. I will say probably 95% of the apps that I've used specifically are terrible at this. They will give you the opportunity to create a multitude of tasks, or maybe they will allow you to add priority 1, priority 2, priority 3, and then color code it. But all that really does is let you slam a whole bunch of junk onto a task. It doesn't actually help you prioritize. Something that actually could help you prioritize is to say, if there's a project that you've been working on and you sent something to the client for them to review, it'd be nice to know when's the last time action was taken on that project, and then be able to go and see at a glance, okay, I sent an email to that client with the mockups or whatever it is 3 days ago. It's probably a good idea for me to create a task or just send a follow-up email to that client or whatever the next step is. Just adding priority 1, priority 2, color red, color yellow to your tasks doesn't tell you anything. It might make you feel busy, like you're just, pressing buttons, but it's not actually giving you any indication as to what is important and what is not. And last but not least is visibility. So like I've touched on a couple of times already, a lot of productivity apps are going to have like a today view, right? And so that you're going to be able to add all those tasks in there that you want to focus on for today. And some of them might even also allow you to bring in some sort of project or grouping of tasks that you can focus on for that day. And then maybe you also have tasks popping in there that have a deadline or due date of today. The problem with that as well is that you're just seeing what is on your plate for today. And so in order for you to step back and get a bird's eye view and start planning for the days ahead, or even what you should be focusing on today, you're completely losing sight of the bird's eye view of all the projects that have been sitting. And so the only way most systems or apps allow you to account for that is to just start digging through project after project after project after project, doing a whole research phase just to figure out what you need to do next, or what might need a task assigned to it either today, tomorrow, or later on this week to move it forward. Okay, so to recap those top 5 most important principles. First, it needs to be simple, and it needs to help you focus. It needs to help you capture things quickly and easily, helps you prioritize, and is visible. Does not allow things to fall through the cracks. Okay, so that's all well and good for a concept. What I wanted to do, as I mentioned earlier, was kind of show you an example of these things in practice so that you can kind of start to see how a process using these 5 fundamental principles can actually help you get more done. Okay, so like I mentioned, we're gonna be looking at Radarist, which is the productivity web app that I've created, if you haven't seen it already, and just kind of showcasing how these fundamental principles have been worked into this to actually help you achieve the day. So the first is, of course, simplicity. One of the things that you'll notice is that this is one of the first apps that I have ever seen or encountered. I'm not saying it's the only one, but it doesn't have a sidebar. And that's what is going to make it extremely simple for you to focus on what you need to, i.e. a inbox, your active projects, and then the projects that are awaiting next action, which at this moment there are none. This is just a complete sample. Set up an account, but we'll see more here in a moment. But the key here again is that it's simple. I don't have a sidebar, which means I don't have to click 27 times to get through all my projects, all of my containers, all of my categories. I see absolutely everything at a bird's eye view on the front page, big, bold, and easy to read. So it takes me minutes as opposed to 30 minutes or whatever it would be. It takes a small fraction of the time for me to get a bird's eye view of everything I've got going on so that I can start prioritizing. Next up is the ability to focus. Something I've really liked about one of the planners I've used in the past, the Full Focus Planner, is that they had something called the Daily Big Three, right? So you would have to pick what was the big projects or goals that you were going to move forward that day. So I always liked that idea, but I didn't really like the idea of just limiting yourself to 3 or forcing yourself to do 3 if you didn't necessarily have 3 big things to focus on. So the idea here in the center is that we've got all our active projects, that is projects that have tasks assigned within them. So there would just be this simple process of every morning just going through, maybe rearranging what projects are most important and then saying, you know what, these are the ones I'm going to get done today. And then highlighted, they're in focus, and then you can start working on them. And then of course I've added this little in focus thing so this is what I'm doing now, right? So there's kind of stages to this focus, but the whole idea is here's what I'm working on now, here's what I'm working on today, and here's what's of course on my radar. Next is capture. And I wanted to make this as simple as possible. I'm not going to go into too much detail because it is pretty self-explanatory. Up here at the top, we've got an inbox. And if you need to, go to the store or whatever it is that you need to do, you can just get that out of your brain. And when you go to the store, you check it off. You check off that you got the milk. And then let's say you've got a call with somebody. You can't do that right now. Let's just move this to my client's website. And there we go. My inbox is nice and clean. Now, the next principle, of course, is the ability to prioritize. And one of the things I've never liked, as I've harped on several times in this video, it's just how often you'll see these drop downs with like priority 1 through 5 or color coding. And it just never makes any sense because it doesn't mean anything. But what does mean something is when I go into a project, having the ability to see when the last action was taken on the project. And then once it tells me, oh, last action was taken today or yesterday or last Wednesday, I then know immediately that when I go in here, okay, so maybe I don't necessarily need to focus on that today since I've already worked on it. I can just add that to the bottom of it. And the last one, which is super important, is visibility. So let me just go ahead and create a quick project, which is empty. And maybe you've had this happen before. You're like, oh yeah, I really need to plan out the vacation, right? Or just something that requires a lot of steps. So this isn't necessarily something that goes in your inbox, but it's something that you do need to start mapping out, and it requires a lot of steps. Well, for most apps or most systems, you put this in here and then it's gone, right? Unless you just so happen to be digging through, you click on the projects tab of whatever app you're using and it's gone. The idea here is that, again, as you're scrolling down towards the bottom, you see, oh wait, something is awaiting next action. That's that I need to plan out the vacation. So why don't I purchase tickets? Then I go back to the front end or to radar view, and we see it's now here in our active projects for me to either focus on or not focus on. Let's say that I go ahead and I create this proposal. You'll see that it automatically disappears. Shows up in the awaiting next action because all of the actions for that have now been taken. And I'm free to begin the process of reprioritizing. So again, maybe it's time to plan out that vacation, set it to the top, put it in focus, and I'm ready to go. But the key is that visibility is inherent in the way that this is laid out, in the sense that I can just do a simple scroll to see everything at a bird's eye view. And if I need to see anything in particular, a particular project in more detail, I can always just click on it and find it, or do a search, or create a template. So for example, I have one for a new YouTube video. So if I have this series of tasks that I'm constantly recreating in projects over and over again, clone it to a project, edit it, and then there we go. We see it right here at the bottom with all of those tasks, and it's all quick, it's all simple, it's all clear, and it has all of those fundamental principles baked in. It doesn't require you to create an overcomplicated system of your own. Okay, so that's pretty much it. I just wanted to share with you the fundamental principles that have helped me get more done and help me focus more when it comes to managing bigger projects and tasks, particularly using Radarist. So if you'd like to check it out, I will leave a link in the description. Otherwise, if you found this video useful, hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and we look forward to seeing you in the next one.